that all the pretty flowers the fairies could give her did not make up for the things she was not tall enough to see. The king and queen had no idea of this. They loved their little daughter extremely, and they only thought how clever and wise they were to keep her from looking into the world that lay outside her garden. She might see something to frighten her if she could see over the wall, they said. The 4 princes had no walls round their gardens, and what was more, they could see over the wall of their sister's garden too, but they never thought of telling her what they saw. Boys always have all the fun, sighed the little princess. I wish I were a boy. Then, one by one, the 3 elder princes rode away into the world and left their gardens to run to seed, and at last the time came for the king's youngest son to go too. It will be dreadfully dull when you have gone away, said the princess, who was sitting on the grass plot in her garden when Prince Hyacinth came to say goodbye to her. Oh, no, answered her brother with a smile. You can still play in your pretty garden. The princess pouted. You would not like to play by yourself forever and ever and ever, she remarked. The prince was sure he would not have liked it at all, but then he was not a little girl. It must be rather dull, he confessed, but perhaps if you wait long enough, some other prince will come into your garden, and then you can ask him to play with you. The princess shook her head. He will never be able to get in, she sighed. Only look at that stupid high wall. Prince Hyacinth laughed outright, as princes sometimes do when their sisters are only little girls. I expect he'll be able to get in, if he is anything of a prince, he observed. Then he kissed her on both cheeks and rode away like the others. And that is how Princess Gentianella was left alone in the most beautiful garden on this side of the sun. And if it had not been for the wymps, she might never have known to the end of her days what the world was like on the other side of her wall. Fortunately for everyone, however, the wymps are never far off when a charming little princess is in trouble, and on the very day that the king's youngest son rode away into the world, one of the nicest and the naughtiest and the wimpiest wymps of all came headfirst through the sun and was sitting on the top of the princess's wall with his legs dangling before she had time to say, "Oh." "Come now," said the wymp, "let's hear all about it." His tone was so exceedingly friendly, and he seemed so unlikely to give her good advice, which was all that a fairy would have done, that the Princess Gentianella dried her eyes and told him everything. When she had finished, the wymp stood on his head to concentrate his thoughts, and reflected deeply. "Will you tell me what's on the other side of the wall?" asked the Princess Gentianella, as the wymp remained in this remarkable position without speaking. She did not know that it never makes much difference to a wymp whether he is on his head or his heels, so she was naturally afraid that he would make his head ache if he stood on it any longer. However, the wymp came through the air in somersaults when he heard the princess's question, and he landed in the middle of a bed of scarlet poppies and twinkled at her. "You won't like it if I do," he remarked. "I'm quite positive I shall," declared the princess. "And you are such a particularly nice kind of wymp that you surely cannot refuse to tell me." No wymp of the right sort could have resisted an appeal like that. And as every wymp is the right sort of wymp, this particular wymp at once did as the princess asked him. "All right," he said. "There isn't much to tell, though. There are the usual rows of mountains, and the usual rivers and lakes and islands and peninsulas and—" "Don't!" cried the princess, stopping up her ears with her little pink fingertips. "And isthmuses," continued the wymp cheerfully, "and volcanoes and hot springs and cold springs and palm trees and apple trees and boot trees." "I don't believe," interrupted the princess indignantly, "that there's nothing but a stupid geography book on the other side of my wall." The wymp looked at her and twinkled more than ever, but when he saw that her eyes were shining, just as her own flowers might have done at the time of the dewfall, he stopped teasing her at once. No one knows better than a wymp when it is time to stop teasing. "Hello," he said. "What's the matter now?" "I thought I should see something quite different," said the princess plaintively. "So you would, my little dear," cried the wymp. "I was only telling you what I saw. Give me those 2 ridiculous little hands of yours, and we shall see everything that I didn't. This time the Princess Gentianella did say, "Oh!" And she said it because she found herself sitting on the top of the wall, with all the world on the other side of it, lying